Have you ever wondered if the chaos you see in society is nothing more than a mirror of the demons you carry inside? We like to believe evil is out there, distant, embodied in strangers. Yet what if it resides quietly within us every day? When you condemn another, are you truly condemning them? Or are you judging the hidden shadows you refuse to face? Society speaks of progress and morality, but beneath the surface desire, envy, and hatred pulse like unhealed wounds. What if the demons Dostoevsky wrote about were never just characters, but reflections of the fractures in your own soul? You might think you are rational, in control, yet how often do impulses, fears, and obsessions sabotage your decisions? Isn't it unsettling to admit that what horrifies you in others is often an echo of something you've buried within yourself? We pretend to be civilized, polished, and modern, but remove the thin layer of order, and chaos rises like a wild storm. What if the inner turmoil you deny is the very reason society repeats its cycles of violence, corruption, and despair? Do you truly know yourself, or do you only know the mask you built to keep the world from seeing your fragile truth? The human mind is a battlefield where angels whisper of hope, while demons seduce with promises of power and freedom. And yet, we rarely acknowledge this war within, choosing instead to distract ourselves with pleasures that numb us. Could it be that your greatest fear is not the chaos outside, but the possibility that you are complicit in creating it? Dostoevsky warned us that when men lose meaning, the void is filled with rage, fanaticism, and destructive passions. How many of your daily choices are truly free, and how many are chains forged by fear, habit, and unconscious desires? What you call normal life may simply be a fragile balance, keeping your inner chaos from spilling into the world outside. And when that balance breaks, do you become the monster you once swore you would never resemble? The shadows inside you do not disappear by denial. They grow stronger in silence, waiting for a chance to take control. Have you ever considered that the real demons are not supernatural at all, but the parts of yourself you abandoned? If this resonates with you, then stay, because together, we will explore not only Dostoevsky's vision, but your own. Chaos does not erupt suddenly. It accumulates silently, fed by small compromises we make with our own conscience. You say, it doesn't matter when you lie, but every untruth builds a world where falsehood becomes the new normal. In Dostoevsky's vision, demons thrive where truth is ignored, where silence protects what should have been confessed. How many times have you silenced your discomfort just to maintain an image of harmony that feels increasingly false? The cracks in your character are not random flaws. They are entry points for chaos, waiting to expand and consume you. You might think you are immune, but corruption begins with tiny permissions, an indulgence, a rationalization, a shrug. When society collapses, it is rarely the work of villains alone. It is the outcome of countless ordinary concessions. Have you noticed how much easier it is to condemn the wicked than to confront the little betrayals you commit daily? The demons Dostoevsky drew were not metaphors of fiction, but portraits of a collective psyche unprepared for truth. What you ignore in yourself eventually shapes the world around you, like hidden fire slowly consuming a wooden house. And yet, people prefer distractions, entertainment, gossip, endless scrolling, rather than this uncomfortable mirror. You tell yourself you are fine, but deep down you sense the trembling foundation under the life you carefully built. Isn't it haunting to realize that comfort can be a mask, a fragile curtain hiding the disarray behind closed doors? Your order may already be chaos in disguise, dressed neatly so you can avoid facing its suffocating presence. If demons exist, perhaps they do not roar, but whisper, persuading you that your choices are harmless, even noble. By the time you realize the weight of these whispers, the structure of your inner world may already be collapsing. Do you recognize that your silence can be just as violent as the screams of those who embrace destruction openly? In ignoring your own complicity, you surrender to the quiet chaos that shapes society far more than open rebellion. Perhaps the demons are not in others at all. Perhaps they are in the excuses you repeat until they sound like truth. If so, then the question becomes, how long can you carry lies before they begin to carry you? We live believing we are individuals, yet so much of our being is stitched together by the approval of the crowd. Dostoevsky saw how easily the collective mind surrenders to hysteria when individuals abandon their inner compass. You may think you are free, but notice how your opinions change when you fear rejection or crave belonging. The demons of ideology, fanaticism, and blind loyalty rise when people no longer dare to think for themselves. How many of your beliefs are truly yours, and how many are borrowed slogans that you repeat without reflection? The mob offers comfort, but at the price of individuality. It offers certainty, but only by demanding blind obedience. In that trade you may feel safe, but you surrender the essence of who you are for the illusion of being accepted. The weight of conformity crushes slowly until your silence becomes the echo of a crowd louder than your own heart. Have you ever noticed how easy it is to join outrage, but how hard it is to stand quietly for what you believe? When everyone screams, the one who whispers truth is branded the villain, and the crowd celebrates his downfall. This is not new. History shows us countless moments where reason was silenced to make space for collective frenzy. And still, today, the same cycle repeats, only clothed in modern slogans, hashtags, and carefully designed masks. You scroll through chaos online, convinced you are informed, yet perhaps you are just consuming orchestrated noise. In that noise, your mind is no longer your own. It becomes a vessel for impulses designed to stir, not to enlighten. Demons flourish where individuality dies, where souls become shadows of one another, and no voice dares to dissent. The terrifying truth is that the greatest prison is not external. It is the conformity that chains the human spirit. And in that prison, rebellion is painted as madness, while obedience is celebrated as the highest form of virtue. Do you see how subtle this process is? It doesn't demand violence at first. It demands silence, compliance, and fear. Dostoevsky was not describing strangers. He was warning about us, about you, about the soul that hides behind comfort. And if this is true, then every moment of your silence may be a stone added to the structure of collective chaos. We often imagine chaos as external, wars, revolutions, disasters, yet the seed of all these begins in the private soul. A restless conscience does not remain private forever. What is unresolved within eventually spills into the world. The quiet resentment you carry, multiplied by thousands, becomes the roar of a movement ready to devour its society. What begins as bitterness in one heart can, when echoed in many, ignite a revolution that consumes its own creators. Dostoevsky knew that the true danger was not the fanatic leader, but the ordinary citizen who never faced his shadow. How many people around you live with hidden anger, waiting only for the excuse to unleash it upon the world? And are you so certain you are not one of them, that given the right trigger, your own restraint would not collapse? People like to think they are rational, but history reveals how quickly ordinary men commit atrocities in groups. In times of crisis, morality becomes negotiable, and demons disguised as necessity whisper justification in your ear. The face of chaos is not monstrous. It looks like neighbors, colleagues, and even friends who stop resisting fear. Every unexamined wound in your soul is a future spark for destruction, waiting for the moment to ignite the crowd. You might ask, but what can I do? And the answer is brutal. Begin with yourself, for society begins in your soul. Self-deception is not harmless. It is the soil in which fanaticism grows silently until it cannot be contained. Perhaps the revolution you fear outside has already begun inside, in your refusal to confront the truth of who you are. Isn't it haunting to imagine that history repeats itself not because of systems, but because of unchanged individuals? What you repress in silence today may return tomorrow, magnified, demanding a payment you are not ready to give. The battle for order is not fought in parliaments first, but in the hidden chambers of the human heart. If you cannot govern your inner chaos, what hope is there that nations built of millions like you will ever find peace? Dostoevsky's demons are not history. They are alive, echoing in every soul that refuses to confront its darkness. So the question remains, if you fear the chaos outside, when will you face the revolution within? The tragedy of human beings is not that we are unaware of our chaos, but that we deny it. until it devours us entirely. You might convince yourself that discipline, routines, and polite behavior protect you, but they are fragile defenses. Dostoevsky reminds us that beneath our order lies a trembling structure that collapses the moment temptation appears. Have you ever noticed how quickly your resolve crumbles when your deepest desires whisper louder than your values? The demons of desire do not appear as monsters. They appear as promises of love, success, comfort, or recognition. And yet, when you follow them, you often find yourself emptier than before, as if they feed only on your illusions. Isn't it haunting to realize that the very things you chase may be disguises of the forces pulling you toward ruin? The search for control, the hunger for validation, the thirst for pleasure. Each can enslave while pretending to free. How many of your ambitions are authentic, and how many are shadows cast by others' expectations on your fragile ego? The modern world praises ambition, yet rarely questions whether ambition itself might be a demon in elegant disguise. You call it progress, but perhaps it is compulsion. You call it freedom, but maybe it is dependence painted gold. In this way, chaos infiltrates not through collapse, but through the applause of a world celebrating your decay. You smile at your success, but do you ever wonder if what you achieved was the very price of your inner integrity? Dostoevsky's warning was not about distant tyrants, but about the quiet corruption of ordinary lives chasing comfort. Each small compromise you accept writes another line in the story of a soul drifting further from its true self. Do you see now that demons thrive not in nightmares, but in every compromise you disguise as a harmless choice? The question is not whether demons exist. It is whether you are honest enough to name them when they speak in you. And if you cannot name them, how will you ever hope to resist them when they come cloaked in desire and charm? Perhaps your real enemy is not failure, but the seductive success that slowly erodes your strength from within. And if that is true, then how will you recognize salvation when it finally comes knocking at your door? We imagine ourselves as masters of reason, but history shows reason is often the servant of passion and hidden fears. Dostoevsky saw this clearly. When people lose higher meaning, logic itself becomes a tool for destruction and control. You justify your anger, your selfishness, your indifference, all with arguments that sound rational but hide emptiness. Isn't it striking how intelligent people can defend cruelty as necessity, convincing themselves they are pragmatic? The demons of ideology always arrive wearing the mask of logic, offering solutions that demand human sacrifice. You may believe you are immune, yet how many times have you used reasoning to excuse what you knew was not right? Rationalization is not wisdom. It is often a disguise for impulses you are too afraid to admit openly to yourself. In this way, chaos grows not in ignorance alone, but in intelligence twisted to serve desires it pretends to resist. Do you see the danger here? That even your brightest thoughts can become weapons against your own soul's dignity. The line between wisdom and corruption is thinner than you think, and reason without truth quickly collapses. Modern culture loves efficiency, productivity, and pragmatism, but what if these values are demons dressed as virtues? You chase optimization, but perhaps what you optimize is not life, but the machinery of your own quiet destruction. Dostoevsky's characters are not fools. They are brilliant minds consumed by obsessions, collapsing under false logic. Isn't it chilling to realize that your intelligence may not save you, but only sharpen the weapons of your downfall? The more you rationalize, the less you feel, and in that numbness, demons dance freely without your resistance. You may think you are progressing, but progress without meaning is motion toward nothing, an abyss painted with light. And when that abyss opens, will you have the strength to stop walking, or will reason itself push you further in? This is why Dostoevsky warned, without a foundation in truth, intellect itself becomes a curse rather than salvation. So perhaps the question is not how smart you are, but whether your wisdom is rooted in truth or disguised desire. And if you cannot answer that, then maybe you are already in the grip of demons far older than you imagine. Human beings hunger for freedom, but too often freedom becomes the very chain that binds them to endless chaos. You say you are free when you indulge every desire, But is that freedom, or is it slavery to impulses you cannot tame? Dostoevsky saw how freedom without responsibility leads not to joy but to despair, violence, and self-destruction. Isn't it ironic that in chasing liberation, people often end up prisoners of their own unrestrained appetites? The modern world celebrates choice, but more choice does not equal more meaning. Sometimes it is emptiness multiplied. You might feel powerful when you say, "I can do anything," but power without purpose is just chaos with brighter lights. The demons of freedom are subtle, whispering that boundaries are oppression, when in truth they are forms of safety. You tear down every wall only to realize the walls were the only things protecting you from your inner darkness. Freedom becomes chaos when it loses its anchor in truth, when it forgets that to choose is also to bear consequences. How many of your choices are truly acts of freedom, and how many are chains disguised as independence? You say you are free, but you cannot stop scrolling, cannot stop consuming, cannot stop comparing yourself to others. What if your so-called liberty is just addiction with better branding, a prison you decorate to feel less confined? Dostoevsky's demons thrived in this false freedom, in the spaces where people mistook chaos for liberation. Isn't it unsettling to think that your greatest chains might be the freedoms you guard most jealously? You demand autonomy, yet the very things you cling to slowly dissolve your capacity to live with depth and meaning. The tragedy is not that freedom exists, but that you mistake its counterfeits for the truth you secretly crave. And in that mistake, you may lose not only your soul, but also the society that depends on souls with clarity. Without responsibility, freedom is nothing but noise, a carnival of impulses, tearing apart the human spirit. The question then is not whether you are free, but whether your freedom leads to truth or to hidden destruction. And if you cannot answer that, perhaps it is time to wonder whether your chains are self-forged in the name of liberty. We often deceive ourselves into thinking that demons appear only in moments of collapse, but they live in routines too. Every repetitive act you perform without reflection is a ritual where chaos quietly learns the shape of your life. Dostoevsky understood that the banal can be just as dangerous as the dramatic, because it numbs you into blindness. You wake up, work, scroll, sleep, repeat, and yet beneath that cycle, meaning slowly erodes until only emptiness stays. Isn't it haunting that your habits may be the true architects of the prison you complain about but never abandon? Demons thrive not in the extraordinary, but in the ordinary, habits that keep you silent, numb, and spiritually starved. Have you ever asked yourself why you fear silence so much? Why you constantly need noise to escape your own mind? Noise becomes your shield, but it is also the trap that keeps you from facing the terrifying mirror of your soul. Dostoevsky's characters fall not because of sudden evil, but because they lived years ignoring whispers in their hearts. And perhaps you too sense whispers you bury daily, whispers that tell you your current life is far from your truth. The modern world sells comfort as salvation, but maybe comfort is the slow poison that erodes your capacity to resist. You call it stability, but what if stability is just stagnation, a quiet form of chaos frozen into predictable patterns? Isn't it unsettling to think that your calendar may be more dangerous than any enemy if it silences your soul? You chase productivity, yet in that chase you may be producing nothing but distraction from your deeper hunger. The demons of habit are patient. They do not need to break you suddenly, only to keep you repeating without reflection. One day you wake up and you are no longer who you dreamed to be, but who your routines forced you into becoming. And in that moment, you realize chaos did not storm into your life. It grew quietly inside your daily decisions. Dostoevsky whispers still, the ordinary is never neutral. It either saves your soul or delivers it to darkness. So the real question is, are your habits your allies, or are they the silent demons scripting your slow destruction? And if you cannot answer that, then maybe you already know which side of the story you are living. Human beings crave meaning, but when meaning is absent, we grasp at illusions even if they destroy us in the process. Dostoevsky saw how faith, love, and ideals can collapse when replaced with hollow substitutes that promise certainty. You might believe you are guided by truth, yet often you are chasing narratives built to soothe your fear of emptiness. Isn't it chilling how easily people surrender to ideologies, not because they are convinced, but because they are afraid. The demons of false meaning feed on fear, offering you answers that do not liberate, but chain you to collective lies. Have you noticed how seductive it is when someone gives you certainty, even if that certainty costs you your freedom? We think of deception as external, but often the greatest deceiver is your own desperate need for clarity at any cost. You cling to promises that sound eternal, yet they fade, and when they fade, despair grows even darker than before. Dostoevsky's chaos was not just violence, it was the vacuum left when people abandoned truth for convenient illusions. Isn't it striking that modern society is drowning in information, yet starving for the wisdom to discern what is real? You scroll endlessly, convinced you are learning, but perhaps you are only drowning in noise dressed as revelation. And in that drowning, you mistake being busy for being alive, though your soul whispers that something is missing. The tragedy is not that meaning is hard to find, but that you settle too easily for the counterfeit version of it. Demons do not need to destroy you directly. They only need to keep you chasing illusions while truth passes by unseen. Have you ever stopped to ask whether what drives you today is authentic, or just a shadow of someone else's dream? The hunger for meaning is holy, but it becomes profane when it clings to lies that feel comforting but enslave you. Dostoevsky reminds us, without a higher foundation, meaning collapses into fanaticism or emptiness masquerading as joy. And when that collapse happens, it is not only your life that suffers, but the entire society built on fragile souls. So perhaps the question is not whether you have meaning, but whether your meaning can truly endure chaos. And if it cannot, what will be left of you when the illusions finally dissolve? We imagine demons as shadows, but Dostoevsky showed they can also appear as brilliance, charisma, and false light. Evil rarely presents itself as ugly. It seduces with beauty, intelligence, and words that sound like liberation. How many leaders throughout history have promised salvation only to lead multitudes into destruction and despair? And isn't it unsettling to admit that people followed not out of fear, but because they admired the mask of greatness? Demons thrive when people mistake charm for truth, charisma for wisdom, and authority for integrity. Have you ever admired someone deeply, only to later discover their brilliance was a weapon that blinded your reason? Dostoevsky reminds us that deception is not external alone. It is within the admiration that suspends your judgment. Isn't it chilling to think that the voices you most trust may be the very ones leading you away from your true self? You believe influence is harmless, but every influence you accept shapes the architecture of your inner life. Demons flourish in these spaces because they know admiration can be a more powerful chain than fear itself. You think you are free when you follow, but perhaps you are only surrendering your soul in exchange for belonging. Dostoevsky's warning echoes still. The greatest evil is not always brute force, it is seduction disguised as light. Isn't it haunting that your heart can be captured not by threats, but by promises that feel like destiny fulfilled? The modern world is filled with such promises, each offering joy, success, or peace, yet delivering only emptiness. Have you ever asked yourself how much of your life has been dictated by admiration rather than conviction? The demons of charisma demand your worship, not openly, but by making you believe you chose them freely. And in that false freedom, you may lose the very capacity to discern truth from illusion, reality from deception. Dostoevsky's insight remains: the seducer is more dangerous than the tyrant, for he wins your heart before your mind. So perhaps the question is not who you admire, but whether your admiration is rooted in truth or in illusion. And if you cannot answer, then maybe you are already serving demons cloaked in beauty you refuse to question. At the end of Dostoevsky's vision, we are left not with monsters outside, but with the terrifying mirror within ourselves. The chaos of society is only the multiplied echo of countless individuals who refuse to face their inner shadows. You may imagine you are different, yet every unexamined choice becomes part of the silent storm building in humanity. Dostoevsky's demons are not locked in books. They breathe in every soul that prefers illusion over painful truth. Isn't it striking that the fall of nations is written first in the secret compromises of their ordinary citizens? History collapses not because of strangers, but because of people like us, who confuse convenience for meaning. And isn't it unsettling that every time you avoid reflection, you may be fueling the very chaos you fear outside? The world does not change by accident. It changes through the inner battles won or lost in the privacy of your soul. Demons thrive not in apocalypse, but in apathy, when individuals surrender the fight for truth in daily moments. What you repress today will return tomorrow disguised as destiny, and you will wonder how it gained such control. Dostoevsky's characters reveal this cycle: denial, obsession, collapse, and each step echoes in modern lives. And if you think you are immune, remember how fragile your balance feels when silence forces you to face yourself. The greatest tragedy is not failure itself, but living blind to the truth until failure is the only teacher left. You still have time to face your shadows, but every moment of delay strengthens the chaos waiting in your silence. Isn't it haunting to imagine that the future of humanity depends not on leaders, but on the battles inside your heart? The demons outside are powerful, yes, but they are only reflections of the ones you nurture quietly within. To face them is not easy, but to ignore them is to ensure that their reign will expand from soul to society. Dostoevsky invites us not to fear the outside first, but to wrestle with the hidden storm in our own consciousness. And perhaps the question that remains is not what will happen to the world, but what will happen to me? For the fate of the many is written in the courage or cowardice of the few willing to face their inner demons.